Good morning. Welcome to the forecast discussion for December 14th, 2012. Of course, it's Friday. We're getting ready for the weekend. What can we expect this weekend? Well, a transition to much stormier weather conditions. First, let's talk about the observations this morning as of 8:50 a.m. You can see temperatures throughout the region basically range from the lower to mid 20s. We have a few warmer locations like around Long Island in the upper 20s, southern New Jersey in the upper 20s, and of course in the Philadelphia metro in the lower to mid 30s. Notice over the interior we are in the lower 20s, but our dew points are also in the upper teens to lower 20s. Keep an eye on these dew points as we head into Sunday, as they're going to be a very important factor on the forecast, especially for the potential for some freezing rain and freezing drizzle over portions of northeastern Pennsylvania, extreme northwestern New Jersey, the Hudson River Valley to the north of Poughkeepsie, say cut off right about here, and also northwestern Connecticut. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Talking about the potential for rain, take a look at our radar. Here we have New Jersey, and as you can see, much of the region is dry as can be. However, as we move further west, we have a lot of showers starting to develop here, and let me tell you something, the models are not picking this up very well. There's a lot of moisture being picked up here. The NAM model guidance is the closest one to starting to realize that this storm is going to have a little bit more moisture than what's being shown on some of the models here. So when we take a look at the latest infrared satellite picture, you can see this storm really getting its act together over the southwest here. This low pressure system is a little bit stronger than what was being forecast, and the idea is that this low pressure system is going to lift and travel along this stationary front towards the Great Lakes. A warm front will follow as that low pressure system lifts north, and that's what's going to bring us the threat for some freezing rain and some sleet over the interior on Sunday. Now, there's some differences in the model guys as far as timing, but let me put it this way for you. If you are in the New York City or Philadelphia metropolitan area or along the coast, this is just rain. However, if you are, let's say, around Allentown, if you are in portions of Sussex County in northwestern New Jersey, to the north of White Plains in New York, or in northwestern Connecticut, you're going to have to keep an eye on this storm, as it could produce a little bit more freezing rain than what's being forecasted on the model guidance right now. So, as the storm lifts north, this high pressure system will shift up towards Quebec in the St. Lawrence River Valley, and then eventually lift up into Quebec. As that's happening, this storm will lift north and east and then start to redevelop along the coast. Meanwhile, another disturbance that's further off over the Pacific will start to integrate with this whole storm and the moisture associated with it and produce an area of low pressure along the coast on Monday. Now, when we take a look at the water vapor satellite picture, notice there is a lot of energy diving south along the west coast and heading to the east. This is what's going to create a very complicated forecast for the model guidance here. You see, I guess you could call it too many players on the field, okay? You have a lot of disturbance, you have a lot of energy, and as a result, there's a high threat for volatility. What that basically means is that the models are having a little bit of a hard time trying to decipher which disturbance is dominant disturbance, how will they interact. Also, how did the convergence and confluence of the air at 500 millibars, basically the winds, basically influences the surface high pressure system over Quebec. How strong is that? So there's a lot of questions here into the weekend as far as the forecast. And so as a result, I would strongly suggest to keep your guard up with this storm, especially again if you're in the interior. If you're along the coast, this is just rain for right now. And the reason why is because the air mass in place right now is just too warm to produce anything other than rain, which, quite frankly, early to mid-December is not really that much of a shock. It's pretty much on par to what you can expect during early to mid-December, considering our water temperatures. However, things are about to change. I'll show you in a few minutes why that's going to be the case. As, again, we're developing a nice ridge developing over the Gulf of Alaska. As these disturbances, each one shifting a little bit further east as it drops south and east towards the west coast. So you're getting this change in the weather pattern over the Pacific. And notice our subtropical jet stream is, well, more than enough amped up with plenty of moisture and disturbances as well. So you can see we're certainly developing a different weather pattern than what some of the model guidance has been showing, and certainly one that appears to be far more energetic and one that's shifting to a more of a trough in the east type setup. So just kind of lay out my preliminary forecast here for the ice. I'll be updating this through the weekend as we get more data and we get more observations. But basically I'm focusing on this area right here, basically around Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, extreme northwestern New Jersey, again the Hudson River Valley to the north of White Plains, and northwestern Connecticut. This is where I expect the potential for a trace to as much as a tenth of an inch of ice from this storm on Sunday. Now again, a lot of this is going to depend on the potential for this cold air to lock in, and also the determination of the type of dew points we have in place. It's important because if we have very dry air in place, it has two effects. One, it creates what's called virga, which basically is where precipitation is falling from the sky but doesn't reach the ground. But at the same time, that also cools the atmosphere. So by the time precipitation does reach the ground, it'd fall in the form of freezing rain or sleet. So a very tricky forecast this weekend in these locations. Everyone else is rain. Rain, rain, rain. So no worries about that for this weekend. If you're in New York City or in Philadelphia and you have some plans, have an umbrella with you, especially on Sunday afternoon and evening, but no threat for any frozen precipitation. Using the European model guidance, now the GFS has been a bit, well, wacky. So I'm kind of staying away from the GFS right now, and especially the MOS temperatures. I think they're way too warm for this setup. So for the most part, leaning on the European and the European ensemble model guidance for this forecast. For this evening, high pressure is in control. Now, here we are on Saturday. Notice that our high pressure system starts to refocus over Quebec. We see some cading or cold air damming down the east coast. And here we have our area low pressure moving along the stationary front. As it's lifting north, we have a warm front here, right about here. You can see this. You can see at 850 millibars, we have a lot of cold air packing up around New England, bleeding into portions of the northern mid-Atlantic. Now, by the time we get into Sunday, take a look at this. Here we have our convergence and confluence. We have a nice ridge developing, and you can see high pressure is situated over Quebec. Now, if this high pressure system was, let's say, around Maine, everyone, including New York City and Philadelphia metropolitan areas, would be in a lot worse shape for the potential for frozen precipitation. But in this case, because of the placement of the high, really the threat is just for the interior. And notice that we do have a little bit of a kink in the pressure right here. So what that's going to lead, and you can see it at 850 millibars, is some low-level cold air trying to bleed down into this area, into northeastern Pennsylvania, northwestern New Jersey, the northern interior basically. So on Sunday evening and Sunday afternoon, look for precipitation to spread into the region, falling in the form of sleet and freezing rain for your interior locations, rain along the coast. I wouldn't even rule out the potential for like a flurry to mix in initially, just because of the dry air in place. But again, this is just a rain event for the coastline here. Moving forward into our weather forecast. Here we are on Monday. Now this is where it gets interesting. We have another disturbance that's going to interact with this whole setup, start to spawn a low pressure system over the southern Ohio and Tennessee River valleys. That's going to shift towards the coast, and as it's doing so, cold air is going to start to get drawn in from the west. Now, on Monday, warm air floods the entire region. Again, notice we still have that little bit of a kink over here in portions of New England. But warm air is pretty much going to dominate here, so I'm expecting rain for the most part on Monday for all locations. Thereafter, once this low pressure system really takes hold along the coast, watch on Tuesday for rain to change over to snow as it's ending. I wouldn't even be surprised if the coastline sees a little bit of snow at the very end of this storm. Meanwhile, we have another disturbance entering the west coast once again. Now look at this train developing. 1, 2, 3, 4. These disturbances are diving south, moving across the southern tier, and lifting up the coast. Interesting weather pattern, is it not? So, once this storm exits, we cool down. We start to get a very impressive upper level low starting to set up around the Canadian Maritimes. That's going to lead to a very impressive blocking pattern setting up. Convergence and confluence aloft is going to build a high pressure system down the east coast. Meanwhile, we have an area of low pressure that is very dynamic and very strong, lifting up into the Ohio River Valley. But because of all the high latitude blocking developing around the Canadian Maritimes, you end up with the potential for redevelopment along the coast. And let me point out that the European and submodel guidance is colder than what we're seeing here. So that could be a very interesting storm for us next weekend. We have a lot of time to watch it, but there are a lot of pieces coming into play here that could make this a rather interesting forecast period for next weekend, just ahead of the Christmas holiday. So things are certainly unfolding and shifting, just as I had warned that we are going to be moving into a far colder and also more active weather pattern for the second half of December. And it looks like that is exactly what's starting to unfold here. And oh, by the way, we haven't seen anything yet with the high latitude blocking, as I'm getting a lot of data pointing to a far more vigorous upper level pattern starting to lock in and set up based on some of the observations we're seeing. So it's certainly a very active and interesting weather pattern on the way. Well, I am your meteorologist, Stephen DiMartino. Of course, you can follow the latest weather information at nynjpaweather.com and on Facebook and Twitter. I'll especially be updating quite a bit on Twitter, depending on what evolves on Sunday, and we'll have the latest information, if it's needed, on Sunday as the storm evolves. So, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and of course, stay safe out there.